Okay, we are ready to start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New York Times Student Journeys webinar. My name is Amani Marcos, and I'm the program manager for Student Journeys here at the Times. To bring you the New York Times Student Journeys program, we are thrilled to be collaborating with Putney Student Travel, a student travel organization with over 60 years of experience in the field of experiential travel off the beaten path. And joining us from Putney, we have one of their associate directors, Annie Agnone, who in a few minutes will give you a program overview, talk about structure, health and safety, the application process, and our 14 programs for this summer. I'm also very pleased to introduce Jan Benzel, who is a veteran editor from the Times and also one of the experts on our Oxford journalism program. And this evening, Jan will be talking about the role of our experts on each program and the special knowledge and insider's view they bring to the theme of each of our programs. Then at the end of today's webinar, we'll have time for your questions, which you can type into the chat box on your screen, and we'll do our best to get through everyone's questions before we conclude. So before we begin, I want to take a moment to talk about why the New York Times has a student travel program. Education and travel have been fundamental to the Times and its mission since the early days of the paper. And in fact, some of the first articles on education and travel were written in 1852. So continuing this focus today, the Times has programs and initiatives geared around education and travel, such as the Learning Network, which offers content and lesson plans for teachers, NYT EDU, the School of the New York Times, and a recent initiative we just launched that empowers our subscribers to sponsor subscriptions for high school students in public schools. And then on the travel front, we launched the Times Journeys program in 2012, which offers our curious readers an opportunity to travel with a Times journalist or expert and see the world through their eyes. So our student travel program is a clear extension of these initiatives and offers students an opportunity to travel with a New York Times journalist over the summer and do a deep dive into topics ranging from climate change to the arts, to immigration, and really get that insider's perspective that one of our journalists offers and engage with the most newsworthy and important issues of our time. And so with that said, I am pleased to turn it over to Annie, who will start our program overview.
Thanks, Amani. Okay, so as Amani mentioned, I'm Annie Agnone. I've been a program director at Putney Student Travel since 2014. And before that, I was a trip leader for 4 years. I've led programs in Ireland, Italy, and the Czech Republic. And then I now organize programs in Europe and the US. So just to kind of give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about now, I want to give you a little bit of our history as an organization of Putney Student Travel, and then kind of run through the types of programs that New York Times Student Journeys is offering for 2017, and then answer kind of some frequently asked questions that come up when considering summer travel abroad, and run you very quickly through the application process. So really quickly, our history is that we are a family-run organization. We've been around for 66 years. This is our founders, George and Kitty Shumlin. Kitty on the left there was from Holland, and they met and fell in love and were educators, and they ran the very first Putney program ever in 1951 to Europe, and back then you actually had to take a boat across the Atlantic to get there, and I think the whole thing cost like $500. And then they had two sons, Jeff and Pete, who are on the left here in this photograph. And you might recognize Pete. He actually just rejoined Putney Student Travel as co-director after a leave of absence for 7 years. He was campaigning, and then he was serving as the governor of Vermont for 3 consecutive terms. And he chose not to run again, and instead came back to work with us again. And he always says that it's because it takes forever to get things done in government, and it was so much more rewarding to spend a summer working with young people and seeing them change in such a short time. And that was really fulfilling to him. And we're really thrilled to have him back and also super proud of him. So it's actually kind of funny, having been around for as long as we have, we see these strange coincidences come up. This is actually a photograph from France, right outside of Lausanne in Switzerland, that our co-director Jeff took when he was leading a program. He's 25 years old, and this is a program that one of our leaders took just 3 years ago, who had never seen the original photo, and it's just so remarkable and such a special thing. We have these funny coincidences come up, and we have these long-standing relationships with people, and some of the people who are welcoming our groups today are actually the daughters or grandchildren of the people who welcomed some of our original groups 40, 30 years ago. It's really special to be a part of that, and we are just so proud to bring those long-standing relationships and that commitment to off the beaten track educational travel to these New York Times programs. So this is the barn. I might talk about it a couple times, so just so you're not confused. We actually work in a barn. I'm in it right now. It's beautiful inside and out, and it is at the end of a dirt road in rural Vermont. It's got a pond out back where we ice skate in the winter and swim in the summer. It's absolutely lovely. And these are my colleagues. There are 18 of us here full-time, and just a complete diversity of backgrounds and experiences and languages that we speak and countries that we're experts in. And the one thing I think that really binds us together is that we all have this firsthand experience, whether it's from going on a program like this when we were young people or leading a program like this, where we've seen how transformational travel at a young age can be, and we're just products of that and real believers in it. So because we're a small operation, if you want to talk to someone about a program that you're interested in, you can just give us a call and talk directly to the person who organizes it and knows it most intimately. So if there's anything that I mention here tonight or I don't mention here tonight but you've seen on our website or our catalog, feel free to get in touch with us. We'd love that, and you can talk directly to the program director. And so that actually brings us to the programs themselves that we've created in collaboration with the New York Times. This summer, for 2017, we have 14 different destinations. They're 2 to 3 week programs in the summer, departing between June and August. And right now, they're just for high school students, completing 9th through 12th grade. And we're going to open them up to middle school students starting in 2018, which we're super excited about. And then looking way ahead, also college and gap year programs are definitely on the horizon. But with the exception of our Oxford program, which I'll talk about in a little more detail in a moment, these are pretty small group experiences. And I like to describe them as being large enough to feel very vibrant and have this incredible diversity of opinions and backgrounds and interests and personalities, but also small enough so that you can actually make real connections both within your group but also in the communities that we enter into. So they're pretty special that way. And then, as Amani mentioned, these are programs that delve into the destinations and themes covered by the New York Times. So each program has a theme like climate change in Iceland and renewable energies, social justice in the American South. We have an immigration program that focuses on refugee issues in Germany. And these are topics that you'll see straight from the headlines: food, arts and culture, science, economics, politics, things like that. And I do want to highlight just a couple of our programs so you can kind of get a sense of what we focus on and how these programs work. And then kind of move on from there. But if you have any questions about programs that you see on our website or in our catalog, we're happy to answer those. There's much more than just the two that I'm going to mention. So one that we're really excited about is our Columbia program, which focuses on the peace process that is ongoing after 50 years of war in the country and conflict between the government and armed militant groups. And our expert on that program, the New York Times expert that joins, is Annie Corial, and her father was actually kidnapped by the FARC, and so she's an incredible resource for our students. So this program, like most of our programs, is joined by 2 or 3 group leaders. It'll be a group of between 15 and 24 students, and then that expert joins for part of the time as well. And students on this program begin in Bogota. They go to the coffee region, Rio Claro, Medellin, and they really get this kind of transnational take on the peace process, and speaking with people, politicians, reporters, people who have been impacted, survivors, and just talking with them about what it is like to be at peace after 50 years of conflict. It's an incredibly powerful moment to be in Colombia, and we're really excited to be there. We have great contacts. And then, I've talked about these programs that have themes, and we delve into those themes on these programs. And then we also have our Oxford program, which is a little bit different. So this is a program that has capacity for a much larger student body. We're talking like more like 50 to 70 students, and maybe 5 or 10 leaders, and then it is joined by 2 New York Times experts, Jan Benzel, who's here with us today, and then Bruce Weber. And on this program, students kind of get a crash course in investigative journalism and digital media, and they're given these field-based assignments where they get their hands dirty with everything from blogging to journalistic ethics, media law, writing, editing, and Jan and Bruce are there to lend their expertise for about 6 days of the program. It's a tremendous opportunity to kind of hone their skills. And kind of on that note, I think that it's worth noting that with the exception of our Oxford program, students don't need to have a background in journalism or consider themselves journalists to get a lot out of these programs. And I like to kind of introduce this idea by saying that one of my all-time favorite writers, his name's Warren St. John. He's actually written quite a bit for the Times. One time when I saw him speak, he said that his favorite thing about journalism, the reason that it got him out of bed in the morning, was that it essentially gives you a carte blanche to put yourself in situations you might not ordinarily be in and learn your way out of them. So it gives you an excuse to stare at people and talk to strangers and ask questions that you might not normally ask, and talk to people who have very different backgrounds from you, and just follow your interests and passions, and learn about something. And I think that that is really the joy of these programs, is that on Oxford you are developing your journalistic skills, but on these programs you are using the tools of journalism and of storytelling to dig really deeply into a topic and learn about it in a hands-on way, and that's really exciting. And then one thing that I also think is important about these programs is that every student pursues an independent project, and it's completely of your own choice what that project is, what form it takes, the focus of it, but it's in some ways supposed to be connected to the program theme. So it's your opportunity to find where your own interests and passions intersect with the thrust of the program, and your leaders and your experts are there to help you make it happen. And it's really an opportunity, it's not school, you're not going to be graded. It's an opportunity to explore something you're interested in a fun way, and present it at the end of the program and celebrate with the people that you're there with. And then I have mentioned our group leaders a couple times. They're an incredible resource for our students. They speak the language, they're experts in the places that we go, they're storytellers in their own right, and they're thrilled to be there and connect with students and share their expertise with students. They're also committed to group dynamics and the health and safety of the group. They're incredible, incredible people, and we're lucky to have them with us. And then I've kind of talked a lot about the structure of these programs, and they are pretty structured programs where we're digging into some meaty issues and doing a lot. They're also super, super fun. This is your summer, and we want you to have a good time. And so there's a lot in place to make that happen, whether you're canoeing on the Mississippi River on the American South program, or you're snorkeling off Kicker Rock on our Ecuador biodiversity program, or in Iceland, the group gets to look for Arctic foxes on an abandoned nature reserve. It's pretty magical, and we just feel like so many of our students come from high pressure academic environments. We want you to have an amazing summer, and we also think that you're going to get more from it if you're having a good time. So a couple quick notes about health and safety that I think are pretty important. We have, in the 66 years that Putney Student Travel has been around, we've brought all of our students home safe and sound, and part of that has to do with us only engaging really qualified leaders who are committed to the health and safety of our students. They're CPR and first aid certified. We bring them here to Vermont for an orientation weekend before the summer, so they have a chance to get to know their students and think ahead about the program and do some planning. And then we also have an incredible communication network, which is part of what keeps our students safe. We have a 24-hour emergency line during the summer that is staffed by directors here at the barn. So it's not a call center. It's me. It's Jeff and Pete Shumlin. The phone rings by our beds, and it's staffed by a team of people 24 hours a day. So if you need anything as a parent, or if the leaders need anything, we're always just a phone call away. And then another thing that's important to note in terms of health and safety is that we also enroll all of our students in International SOS if it's a program that's outside of the US or Europe. And what that is, it's emergency medical evacuation that takes students, if needed, from where they are to the closest Western medical center of excellence. And they have a team of doctors, they come, they get you. We've only had to use it one time in my institutional memory, and mostly it really doesn't come up. We do also have a network of in-country contacts and clinics and English-speaking hospitals, and we know about them. They're pre-identified. The leaders are aware of them. And if there's anything that happens beyond like a scraped knee or a runny nose, we're communicating with parents if we need to bring students to the doctor so that families can be involved in those medical decisions. And then, I mentioned kind of our communication policy. We try to keep parents in the loop throughout the summer. We have summer blogs that each group will keep, and we try to update those every few days. More if it's a city-based program with great connectivity, maybe once or twice a week if it's somewhere a little more off the beaten track. And then students are allowed to have cell phones on our programs. One of the first things that happens in country is that the group sits down and has an in-country orientation and talks about what they want for their weeks together. And inevitably they talk about how they're going to use cell phones throughout the course of the program, when it's appropriate to use them, when it's maybe not so appropriate, and they make those decisions together as a group. And then we do organize group flights for all of our programs that go outside the US. What this means is that we book a block of seats through a commercial airline, and we negotiate those rates in the fall, and we pass the cost along to families who would like their student to travel with the group, and it's escorted by at least one of the group leaders. I will say that there's some flexibility if you want to meet the group at the end of the program and have a family vacation after the program is over or before the program starts, and need the student not to return with the group or to meet the group in country, there's some flexibility, and we can work with you on that as well. And then really quickly about the application process. It's all online. You go to our website and you can click Apply Now. You create a login and fill out some basic information about yourself so we can get a sense of who you are, and then select a first choice program. And then once you've done that, we'll be looking for a $700 deposit to hold your space in the program while you complete the remainder of the application, which will be 2 teacher references. You just enter the names and email addresses of 2 teachers who know you well, and we send them a really short form to fill out. So it's pretty quick. And then a short personal statement of about 300 words, basically saying out of all the things you could do with your summer, why do you want to do this? And it's really just so that we can get students on our programs who are really excited to be there and who are ready for this kind of experience. And once all that is together, we'll get back to you with an admissions decision within a couple days. We send you an email letting you know that you're in, and then that same login becomes what we call a digital locker. And that will be your one-stop shop for everything that you need leading up to the program. Packing list, travel information, an optional reading list in case you want to do a little pre-trip reading or watching of videos ahead of time. Health forms that you need to fill out for us, all that sort of stuff. And we're available if you ever need to chat about anything. And so that pretty much wraps up what I've got. And so we're going to hand it over to Jan Benzel to talk to you a little bit about the role of the experts on our programs.
Great, thank you, Annie. And while we bring Jan up, I'll just let you know that she'll tell you about the role of the experts, talk about the Oxford program a little bit, and then we'll do sort of an interview style where I'll ask her a few questions about the skills students will learn and what journalists will bring to the program. So Jan, I will turn it over to you.
And hello, everybody. I will tell you about the New York Times, but I also just wanted to take a step back and let you know that I am also a parent, and I can speak to the point of view of a parent on trips like these. I'm sure many of you had the experience I did as my kids were growing up. I wished I'd had the life they were having. Whatever you think of the state of the world or the planet, we're living in a much more internationally interconnected age. And there's so many more ways and chances to see the world these days than there were when I and maybe you were growing up. I have two girls, and they had a terrific academic experience in high school here in New York. But I would say they grew more and developed more independence whenever they traveled, particularly without their parents. It really opened their eyes and minds in ways that just don't happen in a classroom. And I would have really loved for them to have been able to go on any of the trips we've got lined up. And actually, I would have loved to have taken these trips, and a big reason for that is the chance to travel with my Times colleagues. These are people who have had multiple assignments all over the world, all over the country. They've written articles, they've written news stories, they've written books. Many of them have also been teachers along the way. They're many different levels in their career, from the youngest to the most veteran, but they are all really very excited about this program, and jumped at the chance to work with high school students, who they all say is just a great group. Peter Applebaum, start with the A, is now an editor on the national desk, and his earlier assignments included a long stint as the Atlanta bureau chief. He was also a cultural correspondent, and he's leading the South trip. He's written a book about the South, kind of post-civil rights era book that kind of sets the stage for the place that the South is playing in today's news and culture. Dennis Overby, you may have read his stories about the cosmos. We may be the only newspaper in the world who has a cosmic correspondent, and that is Dennis. He's taking a trip to Switzerland to visit the CERN laboratory. Kim Severson is a wonderful food writer. She learned to cook from her Italian grandmother. She's doing a farm-to-table tour of 3 or 4 places in Italy. Cuba is the place I would choose to go right now, I think. We have 4 potential trips to Cuba, 2 of them having to do with society and economy, 2 of them about baseball. And as you probably know, baseball is at the heart of Cuban life. Tyler Kepner and Ken Belson, our two sports reporters who are leading those trips. Jim McKinley and Randy Archibald, who have both covered the Caribbean and done quite a bit of reporting from Cuba itself over the years, are leading the other two. Annie talked a little bit about the Colombia trip with Annie Corial. There's a second trip planned with Kirk Semple leading it, who covered Colombia during the earlier regime when it was a very dangerous place to be reporting from. Then a completely different kind of trip. We've got a London theater trip, the critics trip, with two different departures. One with Ben Brantley, our chief theater critic, and the second with Patrick Healy, who has written about theater for many years, but has also covered two presidential campaigns and is now the editor in charge of cultural news. The Australia and Fiji trip has our climate change expert, John Schwartz, and there, as you can see, many others. And you know, we're all excited about these trips and looking forward to seeing these destinations with younger, fresher eyes, and to giving these students some guidance about the kinds of questions and choices a journalist makes when they land on the ground in unfamiliar territory. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions you have about the Times, about preparation for these trips, about what you might expect from the journalists. Amani, you've got some questions for me?
Great. Well, thanks for sharing, Jan. And I thought I'd kick off with a program about your career, since you're joining the Oxford program, which is focused on journalism. So we'd be curious to hear, how'd you decide to become a journalist?
Well, it was a really long time ago. And I was living in Washington at the time, where I'd gone to school, and I had had a couple of journalism internships, and I was an English major. And I had a friend who said, "Oh, Jan, they need some editors down at the Washington Post. Why don't you go down there?" And I walked in and sat down and wrote a couple of headlines and edited a couple of stories, and basically never left. But the moment at the Post that really did it for me, I mean, it was just after Watergate, so Ben Bradley was there, and Bob Woodward, and Carl Bernstein was still around, even though he wasn't at the Post anymore. But the night that I was working nights, 4 to 12:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning until 3, because you put the paper to bed at that hour. The night that really did it for me was the night that John Lennon was shot in New York, and it happened at 11:30 at night. And Howard Cosell announced this on Monday Night Football. The night editor got up and said, "John Lennon just got shot. Nobody's going home." And we sat down and we completely redid the paper. I was working in the style department, where we did cultural news, we did reviews, we did a lot of the party scene in Washington. And between the time when we normally would have been putting the paper to bed for the night and 4 o'clock that morning, we had completely new stories, completely new pictures. The whole paper had been torn up, and readers saw what we presented in the morning. That's how they got their news, that this icon in all of our lives was dead. And just the presentation of that, and being able to do that with the kind of speed and resources, so that readers would get what they deserved and needed and wanted the next day, just did it for me. So it was really kind of figuring out the reader connection that made me want to be a journalist.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So you've had a long career in journalism and in the news industry, so you've probably seen a lot of change For students today who might be interested in learning more about journalism, can you describe one or two of the new skills that journalists need for our digital age that they'd be exposed to on the Oxford program?
Well, I was really glad to hear Annie say that the participants would be allowed to have their cell phones, because that is the tool we all use now for everything. It used to be the reporters would write and the photographers would take the pictures, and then later on video came along and the videographers did the video, right? The cameramen, with TV now, of course, we all do all of that, and we do it with our cell phones. We will be talking a lot about that. We'll have some guest video journalists with us. We have the Oxford program. With the Oxford program, we will have the resource very nearby of our London bureau, which has all these working journalists. So we will be inviting some of them to come out and talk about how they do what they do. We will talk quite a bit about social media and what best practices are for social media and how social media plays a part in journalism these days. What else will we do? But we'll also really focus on expression and awareness of who the audience is and how they receive the news that we're delivering.
Great. So, as Annie said earlier, the Oxford program is a little unique in that it's solely focused on journalism, but across all the programs, that's not the case. Some of them are on climate change, the arts, and other issues. But, journalists can bring a lot of skills for students to be able to explore these topics. So what will the experts on each program teach students across all the trips, regardless of the topic?
Well, the great thing about being a journalist is you have license to ask questions. All of the journalists on all of these programs have parachuted into a new place and had to get their bearings quickly, figure out context for what it is that they're going to be reporting on, and then just start asking questions. I think what we will concentrate on, all of us, is how to start asking those questions, and who do you ask the questions of, and where do you go once you have gotten the answers from one person? Who's the other person you should ask that same question of? We'll all work on kind of balance and context and what we see. And I think, it'll be so exciting in all these places. The Fiji, Australia trip, just the visual richness of some of these trips is going to be astounding. Then there's some trips where the language will be an issue, and how do you deal with that? And the Times journalists all have had to deal with that, work with translators. I know a lot of high school students are studying Spanish and Chinese these days. Some of these trips will give you a chance to practice your language skills, although I'm assured that it's not a requirement to be able to speak Spanish. For example, on the Colombia trip or the Havana trips, or certainly Chinese in China. English is a pretty universal language everywhere. But I think people on those trips in countries where it is a foreign language will have the chance to see journalists work in another language.
Great.
So those are just those trips.
Mm-hmm. And then before we open it up to everyone else's questions, one last question for you, Jan. So from the experts' point of view, how do you recommend that students and families prepare themselves for their trip?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question. All of these all of these experts write prolifically and have written prolifically over, many of them for many years. You can go back and read their work via the Times site, the Times website. They have written books. You may not have time to read a whole book, but you could read about the book and get a sense of what that work is like. I would really encourage you to read the Times regularly, but also to go to other news sources. Read the Guardian, read the newspapers of the countries that you're thinking about going to. Also, Putney is putting together a fantastic resource of books and articles and movies and documentaries and TV series, TV shows to watch that you can get a sense of the place you're going and the kinds of issues that the trips will focus on. And they may also give you ideas for your own projects.
Great. Well, I think that's a good moment to open it up for questions from our participants. So if you have questions, just type them into the chat box, and I'll start with a few that we have already. Does a student need to have any journalism background to join the Oxford trip?
No, not at all. I can answer that if you like.
Annie back in with us. There we go.
Okay. Yeah, no, you don't have to have any journalism experience at all to get a lot out of the Oxford program. It'll be a little bit of a crash course in everything. If you have experience, that's awesome. And it's small enough, and we'll be able to split into smaller groups that can be tailored to student background and experience. So we're alive enough, I think, to be able to make it a meaningful experience for a lot of different students, even if you have a background or if you don't.
Great.
I would say that, could I just add a little bit to that, which is to say, an interest in journalism per se is, it's a plus if you have it, but if you don't, what we'll all be working on is expression. And expression is going to stand you in good stead in any field you decide to pursue. Clear writing, clear thinking, observation. We're going to be doing all of those things on these trips.
Curiosity, too, I would add to that. It's a big part of it.
Great. And then another question is, how much contact does a student have with the experts? And I'll add to that, how many days are the experts joining the programs?
Sure. Experts join each program for an average of 6 days. On a couple of programs, it might be 5. A couple of programs, it might be 7 days. And the students have tons of access to the experts. They give a couple kind of informal talks about their work and life as a journalist, things related to the program destination and theme during their time with the group, but they're also completely integrated into what the group is up to. They might lead exercises, they might do one-on-one critiques, be available for during downtime just to chat about their lives and connect with students on a one-on-one level. So it's a pretty unique opportunity.
Great. And then we have another Oxford question that maybe Jan, you can start with, is can you provide an ideal day for the Oxford trip?
An ideal day?
Mm-hmm.
Or, well, the itinerary is still in some flux, but two of the things that I know I am looking forward to and Bruce is looking forward to are, I think we're taking a trip to Stonehenge, and I think we are going to Stratford upon Avon. which of course is where Shakespeare was born, and there is the Shakespeare theater there, and we'll see a production. Bruce was a theater critic also for several years at the time. At the Times, we'll talk about how reviews happen and how you approach a production. If you're going to write about a production, perhaps do a profile of an actor. So those are two excursions I know about. Oxford itself is a beautiful, august, deeply literary place. We'll be spending a lot of time there and bringing, I think, some of the Times, the people from the Times London Bureau out to talk about their work. Steve Erlanger is the London Bureau chief. I'm sure many of you are familiar with his work. He's been a foreign correspondent all over the world. Brexit, huge story. We'll be focusing on that. We'll get people out in Oxford itself to give their views about Brexit and where it's going and what it means for them. And we're going to do a lot of things. It's going to be a great program.
Great. And so it sounds like there will be a lot of variety on the road on each day. Annie, can you just give an overall of what that variety looks like across the program so people have an idea?
Well, Jen kind of touched on that variety of the types of things that we'll be delving into. We can do everything from food writing to tapping into political situations like Brexit. And I think I kind of mentioned that, students will do these sort of like mini seminars that are really field-based and really dynamic and have an opportunity to practice blogging, a little bit of audio journalism, a little bit of photojournalism, a little bit of editing. They'll be actually receiving content from some of the other New York Times Student Journeys programs that they'll have the opportunity to edit and put up on a blog. It's just going to be really, really fast-paced and vibrant and fun. And then, in terms of kind of a day-to-day schedule, we stay on the Oxford campus and get up in the morning and have breakfast together as a group, and then might split into smaller groups and do these field-based exercises that give you kind of an idea of the principles of journalism and then allow you to put them into practice. Get out there, interview people, take photographs, dig into different topics that you're interested in, and that's sort of the morning and the afternoon, really out and about, and then coming back at the end of the day, having a little bit of downtime, having some one-on-one time with your expert, working on projects, exploring Oxford in a small group with some of your peers, and then you might go out to a play in the evening or go to a trivia night or something at a pub all together. It's just, it's going to be jam-packed and super fun.
Great. And then just to wrap up, there were a couple questions about what's included in the tuition fee and what the application process is. And just so you know, the tuition is all inclusive of everything during the student's experience in country except for the international airfare, since students are traveling from different places. And then for the application, it is available online and at the nytimes.com/studentjourneys. And our program directors at Putney Student Travel are more than happy to speak with you and answer any of your questions about the programs and the application process or the role of the experts. And you can give them a call Monday through Friday. Phone number is 866-870-2095. And we look forward to hearing from you and answering any additional questions you have as you go through the application process. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for joining us on the webinar, and please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions, and have a good evening.